You know, the nation has made a big effort to try. We've tried to compromise. We've tried to compromise. We've tried to compromise. It seems to be just more crisis than compromise. And we're at a point now, especially with the election of Abraham Lincoln, that we're going to be drifting more towards war. So what happened on December 20th of 1860, not too long after the election, on December 20th of 1860, the first state seceded from the Union. Anybody know what state that was? South Carolina. So on December 20th, 1860, the state of South Carolina seceded from the Union.
What does that mean?
Left,
Okay.
broke away, declare its independence from.
So how can they do that?
Well, that's going to be the topic of discussion. Lincoln's going to say they can. Well, by February 1st of 1861, all the states located in the Deep South followed suit and seceded from the Union. So on December 20th, 1860, the state of South Carolina becomes the first state to secede from the Union. And by February 1st of 1861, all the states in what's considered the Deep South also seceded, which would include the following 6 states: Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida joined South Carolina to become the first 7 states to secede from the Union. On February 8th of 1861, those 7 states established a temporary government at Montgomery, Alabama. On February 8th of 1861, those 7 states established a temporary government at Montgomery, Alabama. And the name of this new government would be the Confederate States of America. February 8th, 1861, a temporary government was established at Montgomery, Alabama, and the name of this new government will be the Confederate States of America. After establishing itself, this new confederacy took 3 important steps. So after establishing themselves in Montgomery, Alabama, the new Confederate States of America took these three important steps. 1, they chose a president, Jefferson Davis. They chose a president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis. Second thing they did is they seized all federal arsenals and all federal property located where? In the South. Okay? They seized all federal arsenals and all federal property in the South. Third thing they did was kind of interesting because they knew probably right off the bat that they were really going to struggle competing here. Okay, they knew they're going to have trouble. So they're going to need to have some financial and military assistance to continue their quest. Who are they going to ask for such assistance? No. Britain and France. So what they did is they sent Southern diplomats to both England and France to try to negotiate both financial and military assistance. So they chose a president in Jefferson Davis. They seized all the federal arsenals and federal property that was located in the South. And they sent Southern diplomats to both England and France to try to negotiate both financial and military assistance. Now, there were still 4 southern states that had not left the Union, okay? But they threatened to leave the Union if the Union did anything, but if the Union used any force against those states that did secede. So there were 4 southern states that had not seceded, but stated they would secede if the federal government, if the Union, used any force against those 7 states that did. Anybody want to guess who those states were? 4 of them that we didn't mention. Kind of think. Nope. Tennessee.
Kentucky.
Yes. Arkansas.
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Come on, go for all 4 of them.
Oklahoma.
No, the last one is almost pretty close to the north. Virginia. So the 4 southern states that did not leave the Union at the time, but stated clearly they would do so if the Union used any force against the seceding states, were Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Arkansas. Who's president right now when this happened? Think. What? Who? When they seceded, who was the president? Buchanan. So President-elect Lincoln is going to inherit this situation of secession. You gotta get your face in the camera. We missed you today. There we go. Okay, she's late today, folks. So this entire problem of secession from the Union is going to be inherited by President-elect Lincoln, as President Buchanan did little about the situation. Inauguration Day was later in those days. It wasn't in January. Okay? Well, Inauguration Day does arrive, and Lincoln's sworn in to office as the 16th President of the United States. And in his inaugural address, he made 2 things very clear. 2 things very clear. So again, inaugural day comes by. Lincoln is sworn in as the 16th President of the United States. And in his inaugural address, he made these 2 things perfectly clear. Number 1, secession from the Union was illegal. That kind of answers Emily's question there. He stated that secession from the Union was illegal. And that all federal property in the South would be held by the federal government and protected. So he was going to allow no more federal arsenals and federal property to be taken by the South. He didn't feel like it was theirs to take because they had seceded from the Union. So he made 2 things clear in his inaugural address. 1, that seceding from the Union was an illegal act. And 2, that all federal property that was located in the South, including arsenals and other property, would be held by the North or the federal government and protected. Okay, which means to really start this Civil War, those things are going to have to be violated. Which takes us to our last subtopic of this material, which is the fall of Fort Sumter. Excuse me. When was this federal property taken by the South that we talked about? During Lincoln's presidency or during Buchanan's? Buchanan's. Lincoln made it clear when he was president that no more federal property in the South would be taken by those seceding states. Well, he also pointed out that there were 2 southern military posts that the United States would protect at any cost. These would be Union military posts located in the South. And he pointed out clearly that there are 2 that we will protect at all costs. Fort Pickens in Florida and Fort Sumter in South Carolina. We will protect our military forts located in the South at all costs. Fort Pickens in Florida and Fort Sumter in South Carolina. These were Union or United States military posts located in the South that Lincoln was determined to defend and make sure they did not fall to Southern radicals. Does that make sense? Well, Lincoln ordered U.S. Navy ships to Fort Sumter because it was obviously closer to the north, and he gave those Navy ships supplies to take to Fort Sumter to make sure that that fort would never succumb to Confederate hostility. So President Lincoln orders U.S. Navy ships to Fort Sumter with supplies. Now, if you're the Confederates, and you'd like to take Fort Sumter, because you think it'd be important, and you heard that Lincoln was sending supplies to Fort Sumter, what would you do? Before that even.
Take it before they get there.
Take it before they get there. Take the fort before the supplies get there. That's exactly right. So when the Confederates heard of the news of Lincoln sending supplies to Fort Sumter, they immediately attacked Fort Sumter before the supplies had a chance to get there. And that occurred at 4 a.m. on April 12, 1861. 4 a.m. on April 12, 1861. That's when the Confederates opened fire on Fort Sumter.
People what?
April 12, 1861 at 4 in the morning, the Confederates opened fire on Fort Sumter. The man that was in charge of Fort Sumter was Union Major Robert Anderson. Union Major Robert Anderson. And he held out as long as he could. Because he was obviously low on supplies because they were sending them, correct? And he actually held out against the Confederates for 36 hours. Basically, a cannon fight between the two sides is what it was. So at 4 a.m. on April 12, 1861, the Confederates opened fire on Fort Sumter. Union Major Robert Anderson held out against the Confederate attack for 36 hours. Finally, he could hold out no longer, and he surrendered the fort to the south and marched his men out. Were they interested in his men? No, they're interested in the fort. Now it's kind of interesting. In this 36-hour battle, not one person was killed on either side. It was about 36 hours of just cannon fire. And they protected themselves well enough that neither side lost a casualty. Now, ironically, I can assure you it will be the only and last battle of this conflict that resulted in no casualties. Most resulted in devastating casualties. Well, Lincoln was not happy when he got the news of the surrender of Fort Sumter. He acted very quickly. Problem was, he wasn't ready to go out and kick butt and take names because we didn't have a military that was very well put together, right? So the first thing Lincoln did after he heard about the news of the surrender of Fort Sumter is he asked for 75,000 volunteers to enlist in the United States Army to fight against the Confederate States of America. So he asked for a volunteer army. Okay, he went public and said, I need 75,000 volunteers to put down this rebellion, to fight the Confederate States of America. Now, just so you know the details, if you were to volunteer to enlist in the United States Army upon his call, it was a 90-day tour of duty. 90 days is what you were signing up for. And so many men volunteered, thousands were actually turned away. Thousands were actually turned away. So the new president, after hearing of the news of the surrender of Fort Sumter, asked for 75,000 volunteers to enlist for a 90-day tour of duty with the United States Army to fight the Confederate States of America. So many men volunteered, thousands were turned away. Now, once Lincoln had the necessary troops to fight against the South, what did he do next? After that, well, he didn't really train. He did this before he trained him. Once he did train him, that's good. But what did he do before he actually trained him? He asked Congress for what? Formal declaration of war against the South. So once Lincoln had the numbers necessary to fight against the South, prior to training them, which is a good point, he asked Congress for a formal declaration of war. And Congress agreed, and war was declared upon by the Union on the South. So what happened next? Think about see how we're thinking. What happened after that? What happened immediately after we declared war on the South? That we talked about might happen if something happened. If something happened. Those 4 states, Tennessee, Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, all seceded from the nation. Now, Virginia seceded, but not all of Virginia. So prior to this, there was no such state as West Virginia. So the western part of Virginia, which opposed secession, if you look at the map up here, this used to be Virginia right here. This whole thing used to be Virginia. But at this time, when Lincoln had Congress declare war on the South, the western part of Virginia, who did not want to secede, split off and formed a brand new state, West Virginia. And they stayed loyal to the Union. So the western part of Virginia, which opposed secession from the Union, split off and formed a new state, West Virginia. So, when this thing ends, the Confederate States of America stand at 11 states strong, and they moved the capital city from Montgomery, Alabama, to where? Which is interesting because it was very close to our capital. Richmond, Virginia. So the two capitals are very close, which is kind of weird, but that'll make a point. So the Confederate States of America stood 11 strong, and they moved the capital city from Montgomery, Alabama, to Richmond, Virginia. And with that move of the Confederate capital, Richmond, what we know in history as the Civil War had begun in the United States. And that'll be what we talk about next. But you might be interested in what we're going to test on tomorrow, huh? So let's figure it out. Okay, so we got to go back. We've had a lot of information, so go back in your notes here and let's see if we can figure out some of these answers. It might take us a little bit, but we'll get her done. Now, Missouri, way back, applied to be admitted into the Union, and it was going to upset the balance, right? And some member of Congress, member of the House of Representatives, offered an amendment to Missouri's application. Anybody knew who that fellow was? James Talmadge. So however you want to review, you can, but I would know who James Talmadge was, for sure. Now, we had some politicians that gave their opinions on what should be done with lands acquired from Mexico, right? Anybody remember that? Okay, can anybody tell me who the Democratic congressman was in that particular instance who opposed slavery in any of the new lands the United States acquired from Mexico? That's going to be under opinions very concerning new land acquired from Mexico. And Paris is exactly right. Democratic Congressman David Wilmot was the guy that opposed slavery in any of the new lands acquired. Okay, of those politicians, can anybody tell me the one that believed that the issue of slavery in any of the new lands that the United States acquired from Mexico should be settled by the Missouri Compromise? Who said that? President Polk did. Very good. Yep. And of all those outstanding politicians in that particular subtopic, who was the politician that believed that Congress had no right at all to prohibit slavery in any of the new lands in the United States acquired from Mexico? John C. Calhoun. Very good. So I would certainly know those things. But there was still another politician that believed that popular sovereignty should decide the issue of slavery in any of the new lands the United States acquired from Mexico. And I think actually there was a couple of guys that thought that, wasn't there? Who are they, Delaney?
Louis Cass and Stephen Douglas.
Very good. Louis Cass and Stephen Douglas. Okay, kiddos, when we got into the election of 1848, we had a new political party come into being. What did it call itself? Free Soil Party. Very good. Okay, if we move on to the election of 1860, which you're going to have to flip through a little bit to get to that. Find your election of 1860. Dane, tell me in the election of 1860, was that what you missed yesterday? That'd be ironic. We'll see if you're paying attention on it, didn't you? Who did the Southern Democrats nominate for president in 1860? Southern Democrats.
They nominated John C. Breckinridge.
Very good, John C. Breckinridge. Taylor, my dear, who did the Northern Democrats nominate for president? Stephen Douglas. Very good. Now, we had a kind of an interesting deal in the Republican race. We tried to get a nominee. We went to quite a few ballots, did we not? 4 to get a candidate. So Kellyanna, my dear, who actually won on that first ballot of the Republican race for nomination but didn't have 2/3 majority? Who actually won that first ballot?
William Stewart.
William Seward, yep. Okay, who won on the second ballot, Sage?
Mulvey Pride.
Yeah, so who won? No one. Yeah, no one won. No one. Did anybody win if they tied? No. How about the third ballot there, Macklin? Who won that, but he was 2 votes short of 2/3 majority?